February 19, 2026, 4:23 a.m. Detroit. Federal tactical units surround a brick warehouse in the Brightmoor district. Night vision activated, weapons drawn. The building looks abandoned from outside, boarded windows, graffiti-covered walls, overgrown lot. Inside, Raymond "Icepick" Jackson is reviewing distribution reports with 3 lieutenants. Within 120 seconds, all 4 are prone on concrete flooring, hands secured behind their backs. The agents find what intelligence predicted: narcotics, currency, encrypted communications equipment. What they didn't anticipate was the database, a laptop containing organizational charts, financial records, supplier contacts, not just for Detroit, for 6 states stretching from Michigan to Georgia. This isn't a routine drug interdiction. It's the ignition point for the most expansive coordinated gang operation American law enforcement has ever attempted. By sunset that same day, 214 suspected gang leadership figures would occupy federal detention across Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Georgia. Operation Iron Hammer, 22 months of covert development, had just shattered criminal networks spanning the American heartland. The FBI maintained communication blackout. They needed every location breached, every target neutralized before information propagated through signal messages and disposable phones. Complete silence until the final warrant was served. The magnitude was historic. Not 214 random associates, 214 commanders, decision-makers, regional bosses. The skeletal framework of criminal organizations that had functioned without meaningful interference for years, some for generations. The investigation that emerged from tragedy. It originated with a triple homicide in Cleveland, November 2023. 3 bodies discovered in an abandoned manufacturing facility on the city's east side. Marcus Thompson, 24. Deshaun Williams, 22. Terrence Jackson, 21. Initial assessment suggested gang retaliation. The murders generated modest local coverage before fading into Cleveland's violent crime statistics. But Thompson's vehicle was recovered 3 blocks away. Inside that vehicle, investigators discovered a tablet. That tablet contained something unprecedented. A network architecture, not social media connections. Operational blueprints. Thompson wasn't merely a gang member. He was a regional distribution coordinator overseeing product movement across 4 metropolitan areas. His files revealed supply chain relationships, territorial boundaries, and something that disturbed federal investigators profoundly: cooperation between theoretically hostile organizations. Groups that publicly feuded over neighborhood control were privately operating under coordinated agreements, dividing markets systematically, sharing logistics infrastructure, resolving disputes through arbitration rather than violence. The FBI's Organized Crime Division assumed jurisdiction. What started as a triple homicide investigation transformed into RICO enterprise charges against criminal networks that had evolved dramatically beyond conventional gang paradigms. These weren't troubled youth engaging in street corner disputes. These were structured criminal corporations with management layers, profit margins, and long-term strategic vision. Supervisory Special Agent Diana Reyes directed the task force. 19 years with the Bureau, specialized experience in cartel investigations along the southwestern border. She'd witnessed criminal evolution before. Nothing approached this sophistication. We identified operations generating 8-figure annual revenues, Reyes explained during the post-arrest briefing. Professional money laundering operations, multi-state distribution infrastructure, ownership stakes in legitimate commercial enterprises. This transcended street crime categorization. This constituted organized crime at the highest levels. The investigation expanded geometrically. Each device seized produced 8 additional targets. Each financial document exposed 15 new connections. Surveillance captured discussions about market optimization, competitor analysis, and investment diversification. The task force expanded from 18 agents to over 340, drawing resources from FBI field offices across 6 states, DEA tactical assets, IRS criminal investigation specialists, ATF weapons experts, state police agencies from every affected jurisdiction. They identified 214 individuals satisfying specific criteria. Command authority within documented criminal organizations. Direct involvement in violent offenses or narcotics distribution. Interstate criminal conduct. Evidence meeting federal prosecution standards. Not the complete membership rosters of these organizations, just the command architecture. Eliminate the executives, the strategy maintained, and the enterprises collapse into dysfunction. The evidence accumulation. 22 months of surveillance generated documentation requiring 4 dedicated server facilities, over 67,000 hours of intercepted communications. Financial documentation tracing $189 million in suspected criminal revenue. Forensic connections linking suspects to 29 unsolved homicides. Ballistic matches connecting recovered weapons to shootings across 5 states. Digital communications cataloging criminal operations with the careless confidence of individuals who believed themselves untouchable by law enforcement. The financial investigation alone demanded 63 forensic accountants. Cash enterprises processing narcotics revenue. Shell corporations acquiring commercial real estate. Legitimate businesses including a chain of fitness centers, 4 auto detailing operations, and a regional restaurant group functioning as fronts for criminal proceeds. Bank accounts registered to family members and romantic partners. Deposit patterns engineered to circumvent federal reporting thresholds. Cryptocurrency portfolios moving funds through international exchanges. Investment accounts building legitimate wealth from illegitimate sources. One subject, Darnell D. Money Harris, operated what investigators termed the Amazon fulfillment model for narcotics distribution. Product was warehoused in multiple locations. Orders were placed through encrypted applications. Delivery was accomplished through networks of drivers operating under apparent legitimacy. Quality was guaranteed. Unsatisfied customers received replacements. Revenue flowed through sophisticated collection systems. Harris personally accumulated $2.4 million annually according to recovered financial records. He drove a Range Rover, owned a lakefront property outside Nashville, vacationed in the Maldives. Officially, he operated an entertainment promotion company. The weapons recovery was alarming. Federal agents secured 587 firearms during coordinated operations. Handguns, rifles, shotguns. 94 of them illegally modified for automatic fire. Ammunition reserves sufficient for extended combat operations. 6 improvised explosive devices. Military-grade body armor, surveillance countermeasures equipment, communication jamming technology. This wasn't personal protection. This was paramilitary capability. The coordination complexity. Arresting 214 individuals simultaneously across 6 states required unprecedented logistical precision. The FBI established a command center in Cincinnati, geographically central to all operational zones. Every participating field office synchronized operations to identical timelines. Tactical units rehearsed entry procedures repeatedly. Surveillance teams verified target locations continuously. Arrest warrants remained sealed until execution commenced to eliminate leak potential. The operation required 1,127 federal agents, 489 state and local police officers, 156 tactical operators, coordination with U.S. Marshals for Fugitive Pursuit, DEA partnership for narcotics expertise, ATF collaboration for weapons violations, even National Guard helicopter support for aerial surveillance across the operational theater. Timing determined success or failure. Execute too early and targets would be absent from expected locations. Execute too late and morning activities would disperse suspects throughout their territories, making coordinated arrests impossible. The window was 4:15 a.m. to 6:45 a.m. Pre-dawn operations when subjects remained stationary and vulnerable. Failure carried concrete consequences. These were violent criminals facing lifetime incarceration. 23 targets had prior arrests for murder or attempted murder. 61 had weapons offense histories. 9 were suspects in contract killing investigations. Tactical teams anticipated armed confrontation. 7 suspects attempted flight. 5 barricaded themselves inside structures. 4 engaged in armed resistance. 1 suspect detonated an improvised explosive device during entry, injuring 3 federal agents. Nobody died, though 8 suspects and 7 agents required hospitalization for injuries sustained during operations. By 8:30 a.m., 208 suspects were secured in federal custody. The remaining 6 were apprehended within 72 hours as U.S. Marshals tracked them to locations in Florida, Texas, and California. 1 was arrested attempting to board an international flight at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. The aftermath. The federal indictments constituted a comprehensive catalog of criminal enterprise, RICO conspiracy, narcotics trafficking conspiracy, firearms violations, money laundering, murder in furtherance of racketeering activity, interstate criminal operations, continuing criminal enterprise charges. Some defendants faced charges carrying mandatory life sentences without parole possibility. Others faced minimum sentences of 30 years. The youngest defendant was 24. The oldest was 67. The prosecution approach was uncompromising. No cooperation agreements, no sentence reductions for lesser charges, no plea negotiations for testimony against associates. The Department of Justice pursued maximum penalties as punishment and deterrent simultaneously. These individuals constructed empires of suffering, stated U.S. Attorney Robert Chambers. They profited from addiction. They profited from violence. They profited from community destruction. Federal incarceration for the remainder of their natural lives is appropriate justice. Community response was multifaceted. Relief was evident. Parents who had forbidden children from playing outside after dark, business owners who had paid extortion fees for operational permission, residents who had witnessed murders and maintained silence from justified terror. They expressed gratitude, but also skepticism. They had witnessed arrests before. They had watched new leadership emerge within weeks to fill vacancies created by incarceration. They questioned whether this time would prove different. This time, authorities insisted, was fundamentally different. This wasn't arresting street-level dealers who could be replaced within hours. This was eliminating organizational leadership, seizing financial infrastructure, destroying supply relationships, creating chaos within criminal enterprises that couldn't reconstitute command structures without years of rebuilding. Statistical evidence supported those claims. In the 4 months following Operation Iron Hammer, violent crime decreased 34% in targeted Detroit neighborhoods. Homicides dropped 41% in Cleveland. Drug overdose emergency calls declined 28% across Cincinnati. Open-air narcotics markets that had operated continuously for decades went silent as distribution networks disintegrated. But federal officials acknowledged victory required sustained commitment. "We've extracted 214 predators from American communities," Agent Reyes stated, but the conditions generating these organizations remain unaddressed. Economic desperation, educational failure, lack of legitimate opportunity, generational trauma. This operation created space for addressing those root causes. It's not a conclusion, it's an opportunity. The human cost. The victims deserve acknowledgement. Not the arrested gang commanders, the genuine victims. Like Patricia Morrison, whose daughter was killed by a stray bullet during a territorial dispute over distribution rights. Like Samuel Park, whose grocery store was firebombed after he refused to pay protection fees. Like Keisha Williams, whose brother was recruited at 13 and executed at 17 for suspected disloyalty. They attended the press conference. They stood behind federal officials as cameras flashed and microphones captured every word. Their presence testified to years of accumulated trauma, communities imprisoned by violence, futures destroyed by preventable tragedy, families shattered by criminal predation. The financial cost exceeded $134 million, investigation expenses, tactical operations, prosecution resources, incarceration costs, legal proceedings extending for years. Critics questioned whether those resources might have been better allocated to education, to employment programs, to mental health services, to community development. Supporters argued that law enforcement is foundational, that communities cannot heal while violence persists, that 214 individuals made choices demanding accountability, that justice requires consequences. The ethical calculations are complex, but the mathematics of violence are straightforward. 29 homicides directly attributed to arrested individuals, 67 victims of non-fatal shootings, thousands of lives damaged by distributed narcotics, communities destabilized by sustained terror, economic development strangled by fear, generational trauma perpetuated by criminal enterprise. What follows? Legal proceedings continue. Some defendants accepted plea agreements despite prosecution resistance, pleading guilty in exchange for reduced though still substantial sentences. Others are contesting charges through jury trials. Constitutional rights being exercised. Legal processes being followed. Proceedings will extend for years. Appeals will follow convictions. The judicial system will process 214 cases through its methodical procedures. The criminal organizations didn't evaporate. Power vacuums generate opportunities for ambitious successors. But federal surveillance continues. Case building continues. Network dismantling continues. Operation Iron Hammer established a template. Patient investigation. Comprehensive evidence accumulation. Coordinated multi-jurisdictional execution, a model that can be replicated. Other regions are studying the results. Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston, Miami, Phoenix. Cities confronting entrenched gang violence and narcotics trafficking are analyzing the Heartland operation, evaluating whether similar approaches could succeed in their jurisdictions, requesting briefings from participating agencies. Federal funding for gang task forces increased following the operation's demonstrated success. Resources that had been declining were restored and expanded. The 214 arrested individuals currently occupy federal detention facilities, some awaiting trial, some serving sentences following convictions, some negotiating plea arrangements, some will die in custody, others will return to society as elderly individuals decades from now, returning to communities transformed beyond recognition. Their criminal enterprises are being systematically dismantled through civil asset forfeiture proceedings. $67 million in property, currency, vehicles, and financial holdings already recovered. Additional seizures proceeding through courts. Criminal wealth being reclaimed for communities that suffered from its accumulation. The warning. This operation succeeded because investigators exercised patience, because they constructed comprehensive cases rather than pursuing expedient arrests, because they coordinated across jurisdictions rather than competing for recognition, because they targeted leadership rather than replaceable subordinates, but it demanded extraordinary resource commitment. Federal task forces, 22 months of surveillance, over 1,700 law enforcement personnel, millions in operational funding. That commitment level cannot be sustained indefinitely across every affected community in America. The fundamental question isn't whether Operation Iron Hammer succeeded. The evidence is unambiguous. The question is whether America will address the underlying conditions that make gang recruitment appealing to desperate young people perceiving no legitimate alternatives. Until then, removing 214 leaders simply creates 214 vacancies for the next generation of criminal entrepreneurs. The struggle continues, the communities remain exposed, the stakes remain existential. This is what justice looks like when it finally materializes, late, expensive, incomplete, but real. The question that haunts every community, every victim's family, every child growing up in neighborhoods shaped by violence is whether justice will return when needed, whether resources will be allocated, whether attention will be sustained, whether the political will exists to repeat this operation when new threats emerge, when new organizations consolidate, when new leaders claim territories previously held by the 214 now facing federal prosecution. The communities cannot answer that question. They can only wait and hope and try to rebuild in the space that Operation Iron Hammer created. The 214 made their choices. They built criminal empires. They profited from suffering. They believed themselves untouchable. They were wrong. But their removal is not victory. It's opportunity. What America does with that opportunity will determine whether Operation Iron Hammer was a turning point or simply another chapter in an endless cycle of violence, arrest, and replacement. The communities are watching. The nation should be watching too. This is FBI Takedown, where justice arrives late but arrives completely, where criminal empires fall in a single morning, where 214 predators discover that untouchable was always an illusion. This is a fictional dramatization inspired by law enforcement operations. It does not depict real cases, individuals, or organizations.